man.
Awesome.
First podcast.
First podcast. Awesomeness. What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a very special video for you guys of what I like to call Seated, a new series on my channel where I sit down with local talent and artists and authors and have conversations about things that they care about and that I care about and all that good stuff. What's up, Max? How you doing?
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming. So, you recently just had a book that you published.
I did.
Tom's Adventure. Tell us about Tom's Adventure.
Tom's Adventure is a children's picture book for 2 to 6 year olds, and it pretty much is about a young boy learning to listen to his mom, and through courage and some good friendships along the way, he is able to do what he needs to do. It's about a character that can hop into paintings, like they're different worlds. So within his home, he has all kinds of paintings there. And so this first book, he goes to an underwater world. That is really the major theme of this book. There will be many more as well.
Tell me something interesting about Tom's Adventure, because I know, but I don't think you've elaborated on the story.
You mean about like the story itself?
Yeah, where did it come from?
Yeah, so I actually, in I think it was 2nd or 3rd grade, we had like a contest where we were supposed to come up with a story, do all of the drawings and everything, and then just submit it. And I don't have like too much memories of actually making it, but I do remember just having like a lot of fun. And what I found is that I got first, I think, in this. I didn't even know it was a contest, to be honest. And so then they put me in the newspaper and everything about it. I guess when they still did newspapers. And and so I kind of was like, I kind of always knocked that it's like, hey, I'm kind of good at that. And it was something that I kind of always played around with, even in like 6th and 7th grade. Me and my friends would draw like little stick figure cartoons, and we would make little narratives where all our characters would interact with each other in like a multiverse kind of way. So I've always kind of been messing with it a little bit, but it wasn't until I got a little older where I always read. And I think when I got a little bit older, I was like, okay, I'm gonna actually just like put some effort forth and just like see, like let's have some fun with it,
Nice.
Yeah.
Tell me about Forget Me Not. Because I read Forget Me Not, and I gotta tell you, personally, I related to it as someone who's been through a breakup and wanted to forget the feelings of that said breakup.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if it pertains to you as deep as me, but the father figure part, being an ominous overhead person who isn't with them. The main character didn't have his father figure and took some shrooms and literally had a whole experience of having his father figure back in his life for a moment to have this decision, get a little guidance. How do you relate to that a lot? Is that like a lot of you? What was
so the dad portion was something that was fictional. That is not something that was something that I have had friends experience and they've talked to me about. And so I think that's where I pulled that from. That story though is definitely, as we were talking before the podcast, it's like the heartbreak that the character is feeling in that story. For anyone to give like a brief synopsis on the story, it's essentially about this character. There's a place called Cowles Mountain in San Diego that I used to hike all the time. And so I have the character hike the mountain, and as he's hiking up the mountain, you're kind of like learning through his internal struggles that he's been through a breakup recently. He doesn't really he's younger, so he's a little more dramatic about the breakup and the feelings involved with it. And so he's feeling a lot of burn it all down kind of feelings. And in this story, there's a fictional pill called Forgive Me Now, and what it is you take it, and if you're thinking about someone as you take it, all of the memories attached to that person are deleted from your brain. And so he goes to the top of Cowles Mountain, and he like you said, takes
7 grams of shrooms.
He takes quite a bit of shrooms.
The guy took 7 grams of shrooms.
I was like, I couldn't remember the exact amount that I said, but I was like, he took a lot, and so he starts having kind of like this existential crisis, and his father, they get to have like a meeting of sorts to resolve some of their issues, and it's whether it really happens or not is up to the reader. That's up to your own interpretation. But for the character, he felt that it was really real. And it gave him some closure that he really needs. And then it kind of moves into because the big decision is like, is he going to take the pill? And it's kind of like exploring the thought process of like, would you actually be better off if you deleted those kinds of memories for someone you care about? Because it's like you've learned so many lessons, and part of who you are today is because of that scenario. So it's like is that worth it to you? Like, but hey, it can be solved if you decide to.
Right. It's been a bit since I've read this story. A couple weeks or so I read it back, but I remember there was a part specifically after his dad left that he contemplating not taking the pill made him like trip and drop the pill, and then rushing to get it. I don't recall if he took it. He didn't just take it. It kind of left us in a cliffhanger, right?
Yeah, it does. Because it's kind of like because it's more about the scenario and the thought behind the scenario, and what you can gain from that than like the character's actual ending. It's more meant to be thought-provoking.
There was a specific moment where the father said something that really stuck with me. He said, sometimes life challenges you in the way that you need, not the way that you want. And I thought that was so interesting. The fact that his father popped into the story and basically gave him a little bit of guidance, and then you still see him struggle with the idea of it afterwards. His father leaves and he still...
It'd be unrealistic if it all clicked right
away. Like if he just clicked right away and didn't take it.
He's not a robot, he's you're still like... your instincts are like fighting against it, but it's like maybe it's right,
Yeah. And then for him to say that he had been tripping, the whole duration of the story was interesting at the end when you made the comment or made the additional note to say that he'd been tripping on the mountain for an hour and like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, like you can really put that in perspective and be like, this was all these back and forth internal feelings that you would feel with a hard decision.
Have you ever done shrooms?
In the duration of my life, I've known 7 grams, but
you said you have or haven't?
Yes.
You have?
Yes,
I've never actually done
Really?
I've done like 4, but
oh my gosh,
that was a lot.
For him to do 7 to me was wild because
that's so specific.
From what I remember in my early 20s, it was like you take a small amount, and then if you wanted to feel anything above that threshold, you have to take a little bit more.
Yeah.
So for him to start at 7 was.
But it's because he kind of was, like I said, he was like in a burn it all mindset.
Burn it all.
I think, there's a certain brand of people in this world that when things are going wrong in their life, they like to burn it all down, because instead of like trying to like fix all the pieces, which is like a lot of hard work, it's like instead I could just burn it all down. And it's like, I'm not personally like that, but I have a lot of friends like that. And so, through just like paying attention to their habits, it's like kind of, that's what like writing is. You don't even realize where you're really pulling it from, but you kind of are just, you're like, what would make sense? And what's going to make sense is stuff from your own perspective.
Right. Writing Tom's Adventure versus writing Get Me Now. Writing both of those books, what level of personal experience do you put into your story so far in your writing?
Forget Me Now is probably the most I've ever pulled, because Cowles Mountain is a place I used to go a lot. And also,
you lived in San Diego for a couple years.
For like 6 years, So, I would say, so that was the most I pulled because of where I was at when I wrote it was in San Diego, and it was after a big breakup, and also the feelings of heartbreak. To be clear, like the circumstances surrounding the character are all fictional, but the actual like what heartbreak kind of feels like, I could describe that because I was feeling it. And for me, that was very therapeutic, because it was like I got to take something that was so negative and turn it into something positive, which made me feel like I had like control again. But I remember like sitting there all night trying to be like, should I do this? Because I had the idea for like 3 days before I actually wrote it.
Really?
Yeah, like I came up with the idea in like 5 seconds. I'm not even gonna lie. Yeah, like I was like, what would I write? I remember I was just like high chilling. I was like, what would I write a story about heartbreak based on my circumstances right now? Because I like understood the rational thought of like, hey, I can turn this into something positive this way. Actually like summoning the motivation and just like sitting down and busting it out and then editing it is like a different thing. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, the hardest thing about life is just showing up though. As soon as you're like actually at the seat, you're like in the gym, you're doing the thing. It's
Yeah.
easy to do it. It's just getting to the front door. It's always the hardest
I
part.
don't know if I told you about this, but when I went to look up Wattpad to find Raging Storm and Forget Me Now, I found a story that I thought was yours, and it was a character named Max Nebula, and at the end it had the same kind of like theme that your story had with Forget Me Now.
Really?
Now, yes, and it's so interesting. I have to send that to you because I actually feel like you could have wrote that story. I don't know. It was weird.
How narcissistic would I be if I wrote a main story with Max Nebula as the main character?
And literally, he's
name?
the main character. It was so
Yeah,
interesting.
Can you imagine?
Oh
It'd be
man,
that'd be like, it just reeks of corniness.
it's a
if I
6-minute
did
read.
that.
It's a 6-minute read on Wattpad, and
Oh,
I literally
nice.
read it like, huh, so wild. I know you say that there's certain creative licenses with these stories, these two stories, Time's Adventure and Forget Me Now, they are from experiences you've had. What about Raging Storm?
Raging Storm is actually so there's a period of time of mine where I lived. It was right before 2020, like right at the end of 2019, and I lived in like Bali, Hong Kong, and Thailand for a little bit.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I did not know that.
With an ex-girlfriend of mine, and so when I was in Bali, I remember it was like raining one night, and I literally had a dream, and it was a dream of a bunch of frozen statues, like in a like cavern type environment, like leaking water, but underground a little bit, and then there being a array of frozen statues, all like kind of like this, you know what I mean, like as if they were frozen in action. And then like the base of where that blast or whatever theoretically would come from is like a sword sticking into a stone with two like ooze type monsters and like a big bad like frozen behind it as well. Like all, and them all just like in stone, like just encased like that. Wow. Like that's the scene. And so I had like a dream of that scene, and it's just like, you know, it's super classic fantasy vibes. And so I was like, ah, man. And I was reading The Witcher at the time, and I was like, and I was like, this story. I started pulling it backwards because I realized, I don't know why I knew, but I knew that it was like the end of the first book scene. And so I started pulling it backwards of like, okay, like who is the guy? Like who are the two ooze monsters? Like why are people frozen? What does the sword do? Like what are all these things? And I started to kind of like build it out backwards. And then after I built it out backwards to a certain point, I remember one night I sat, it was actually in Thailand where I sat like and just came up with a shit ton of character ideas. Like all I did all night was just come up with character ideas.
I realize it's a body of work that you created starting in like 2021, I think ish. I think I said September 2021 was the first publication of that first couple chapters.
Yeah.
And you've been piling. I saw on TikTok where you literally showed one day's worth of like additional writing for a chapter, and it was like 1,400 like words or whatever.
Oh, is like I usually average around 3,000 to 4,000 words per like writing session.
Yeah, no, it's dense, and I appreciate that, because personally, like sometimes I feel like I'll go into a story and read a book, or like I liked Forget Me Not.
So from your perspective, you feel like it's kind of dense, and I take that as a compliment because that's like kind of what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, with Forget Me Now, I liked it, but I also read it on my lunch break in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And when a book stays with me, that's the reason why I have so many, like, I mean, Stephen King, like you see my bookshelf, a lot of Stephen King books on my bookshelf there.
Yeah.
A lot of his books took me about 3 weeks to get through, 3 weeks to a month to get through. I'm a slow reader. And
That's not even bad.
I like when it stays with you.
Oh,
when a book kind of, you think about it the next time you sit down and you're like, you know,
those are the best stories where you're
like,
even the ones where like a big event happens and you gotta go on a walk. You're like, I just gotta like sit on that moment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've had a few. It happens rarely, but when it does, you're like, no way.
Yeah.
It always makes me feel weird whenever I run into somebody and they say they read it, and like they read it, and like I remember one of my coworkers at my old job, She asked me for it, and in like 2 days, she had read all I had written.
Oh wow.
I know.
Oh, she's good.
No, and then she was like, for like weeks afterwards, just like, when's the next one? I was like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of slow. I'm slow with the Raging Storm because it feels like a lot.
Or have you mentally seen the ending of that story?
Yeah, I know where all 3 books are going generally, especially
3 books.
Yeah, well, the general idea of the series is actually I built the magic system in that world to be very open, and I also have made the scope of the world very big. So we are focused on like one specific storyline that's going on in Raging Storm between these 2 continents, the one that's colonizing the other. But the general like direction of the story is like all 3 books are going to happen. A big event is going to happen within the world that then, when I feel like it, I can write singular novels in the world, but like on the backdrop of this event have happened.
Right.
So you can read it for the first time and it's fine. It'll be written like a new story. You don't have to technically know. But if you read, Raging Storm, it's the series name is going to be called the Impact Chronicles. So it's going to be called the Impact Chronicles. And so when you read the Impact Chronicles, the first 3, the trilogy, the Raging Storm trilogy, then it will move on to its other series where, it won't be a series, it'll be singular books. I'll just kind of probably for a little bit bop around in different continents and different storylines that I find intriguing and excite. Because for me, it's all about having fun. If I'm having fun, I will put it out at a good pace. If I put it at a good pace, then people will be happy. So
absolutely,
that's for me. Like that's why I chose writing as a profession. It's like it's not like the highest paying profession in the world. It's more of like, what can I do for the rest of my life that I'm gonna enjoy? Yeah. And writing is something that I can see myself always being able to, until I'm old, enjoy doing. Because it's like it's just flexing your creativity. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
There's obviously skills to go on with prose, and there's so much that goes into it. I have to tell you about my writing mentor that I met in California. Shout out David Putnam if you haven't heard of him. He's a mystery thriller author. He writes books that I would honestly say are similar-ish to like old James Patterson.
Oh.
Yeah, he's like, that's his style. I would say his books are a little more cop perspective, but it's because he was a cop for 30 years in LA. That makes sense, right? Yeah. And wonderful human being. I met him at I used to manage a Barnes & Noble in San Diego, and the San Diego, we would have a lot of the authors come through for Comic-Con, and he came through. He actually lived in Temecula, which, if you don't know, is only like 2 hour or so away. And he came, and I talked to him for a little while. I was like, hey, this guy's like a good writer. He seems super cool. And I was like, I went up to him, and we were chatting for a while, and he seemed like we were having like a good vibe. And I was like, hey, would you mind reading, my story that I've made so far? If it's trash, that's okay.
Raging Storm?
Yeah, and this was Raging Storm, like V1, version 1. And so he said, print it out, meet up with me in Temecula, or email it to me. I'll print it out, and I will give you critique on all of it for free.
Wow.
Yeah, and then meet up with me in Temecula, and we'll go over the notes.
That's good. That's awesome. Know.
That's awesome. But when I showed up, the script, like the writing, there was more of his red ink of him saying no, than my actual writing. So initially, I was very disheartened because I suck. You know what I mean? Like it's an understandable feeling. But then I was kind of like, well, especially as my ex-girlfriend at the time, and she gave me a good point. She said, like you can think of it that way, or you can think of it as like she's helping you speedrun getting good, or he's helping you speedrun being good. Like he's going to show you what you're doing wrong. Instead of you having to spend 2-3 books figuring it out, you can figure it out now. Yeah. And I was like, that really shifted it for me. I was like, I just gotta take my ego out and be a student.
Now, was this before or after you had already posted parts of Raging Storm to Wappad?
Already I had. And so then what happened is I rewrote it from page 1.
Wow.
I rewrote the whole entire thing. I had 10 chapters out at that point. I rewrote it. The 10 turned into like 14. And then after that, because I had a lot of problems, and I still have a lot of problems, it's going to be a big work in progress. But anyways, And then after that, I then continued it on from there. But even then, the thing about writing a book is your writing skills are exponentially getting better, especially your first book, like long form. Your writing skills are getting exponentially better as you write each chapter. So as you do that, the first chapters are gonna feel like crap compared to the later chapters because just your like prose and everything. You know what I mean? That's a big thing because you just have to be okay with it being not perfect, and then that's what the second draft is for. Second draft is where I'll go through and I'll take all of these things and make it more of a consistent voice and like prose and the way I go about things, like consistent across the board. And so that's just what I've had to do because you're like, you know, every time you're like faced with that. And I would say this to anyone wanting to write is continue to write, just finish it. Worry about editing. If you lightly edit to like get back into the mind frame, like your previous chapter to get back in the mind frame before you start writing your new chapter, that's chill. But like don't go back and rewrite whole parts of your book while you're writing it because you're just never going to get anything done. You're going to be in this perpetual cycle of like, I'm never going to get it done because you're always like re-editing things. And it's like you just have to be done at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to move forward, you know, you can go back and really tweak it, but getting it out first, it makes sense. It makes sense. Do you have any advice for anybody writing a book who basically starts out but doesn't know where they want to go?
I don't know. The thing about writing is there's so many ways to go about doing it. There's no like right way. Like there's probably like people like come up with a better way than me, you know? And so my way of going about it is I create an outline of major events that I want to happen. And then after I create that outline, I really focus on like what is the character's arc? Like where are they going? Like where do they start at and where are they going? Like that is a major, and then I focus on that almost more than I focus on the actual plot because in my experience, characters is why people read. Like they want to feel the progression of the characters.
Yeah.
If you are giving good progression, your plot could be the coolest thing in the world, but they have nothing to like anchor them into the story emotionally. And so that's where the characters come into play. And so for me, it's really about doing that. And so to answer your question, it's hard for me to kind of think of writing a story without already knowing the ending. Because I haven't had that yet. Like every story I wrote, I knew the end by the time I started writing. Because I'm understanding where the flow of the story is going. And the way that you described writing is actually, funny enough, the way that Stephen King does it. So there's like there's like a spectrum. There's the outlines, and I think they call them pantsers. I still don't really know why. But what that term means is that you are kind of, you create like an initial moment of tension and story between characters, and then after that you kind of continue writing it by going, what is the logical next step for this story to go? And so you just keep walking it out like that, because that's what story building is a lot, is just asking questions. It's like, what would this character do now? Like if I had a character and her dad busts in the room and says, hurry up, pack all your things, we gotta go. What would be, based on my character's personality, which I've already designed, and the dynamic between their dad that I've already designed, what would be the logical next thing that she would do here? Would she fight against it? Would she go pack? You know what I mean? And that's how you can kind of build a story out that way. Because you're just asking, what would the character do next? You know what I mean?
Is that why it's important for basically to come up with the character development first and basically make this character, make notes, make ideas before even starting a story? Now you know what this character is, who they are, and then you can respond as you write, knowing. You say writing the character out first before starting to write?
I feel like you want to know your character at least a semi-bit before you start writing them. Like a lot of authors, when you read what their process is like, they talk about it in a way of like they're putting on a new glove. And they got to try the glove out and break it in, you know, or the shoes, I guess is a better analogy. And it's like you got to like break in the shoes a little bit by writing in it. You don't even have to use what you write, but you're kind of like trying to figure out who is this person and like what would they do? Because you want every character that we love in stories, I can give you a scenario that would happen to that character, and you would go, well, that character would do that. And that's good characterization because you know what they would do because they're consistent across their character within whatever their medium is.
Exactly. Yeah,
and so that's like really where it comes down to is like when you're creating characters, you need to learn who they are. And then when you learn who they are, and then you can actually create a narrative for them that's interesting. Because once you know who they are too, you start to know, you realize that they're like people you know in real life, and then you're like, if this person was the best version of themselves from my perspective, what would that look like? And then now you have a character arc because you go, okay, well, the character, I want them to start here and I want them to end here. How do I get there using this plot?
That's very interesting. I never even thought of that. That's wow.
Yeah, that's how I think about it. So, I mean, how I think about it and many other people. I've been taught this through my writing mentors. Yeah, I'm a mixture of my reading knowledge from reading a lot of books, my writing mentor who very much helped me, and then my own just like learning on my own. So that's a mixture of my stuff. But yeah, the big thing is my way is not the only way though. Like I said, Stephen King has bestsellers where he's one of the biggest selling authors of all time. And he doesn't write like I do at all.
Right.
He used to do a line of coke and then go write freaking Cujo, not remember it, and it sold millions, and they have a movie about it.
It's crazy to me that process, his process has changed so much over the years. To see someone write over 80 books is crazy. Yeah. I have a question for you because I don't really have many people that I would do this with, but would you be willing to do book talks with me?
What would that pertain?
My book talks, I'm structuring them basically to feel like I am doing a Socratic seminar on that book, but I don't want to give away the ending. I just want to talk about things within the book that people can reference and learn from and dive deep into. Pick a certain book and we pick that book together. We critique, we talk about it, we make a list of what we're going to do and talk about, and we just have a conversation about the writing style, the theme, the story, the origin, impact it had on life, maybe,
Yeah, I would be open to doing that for at least one book. Yeah. Just to see how that goes.
At least one. Yeah. At least one. You heard it. At least one book.
At least one book.
So I've got a list of rapid fire questions for you if you're interested in just throwing out some information that maybe people don't know about you yet. Okay? Ready?
I'm down.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Cat or dog?
Cat.
California or New York?
California.
Song last on repeat?
Girls by Kid Leroy.
You can only have one item during a zombie apocalypse. What is that item?
Shotgun.
If you look back thinking of a past failure or mistake you might have made leading toward your future of success, which you have right now, what would that be? And what is your favorite failure, if you get what I mean there?
I would say, what has been I mean, honestly, moving back here from San Diego felt like a failure for me initially. Like, I was like, oh, I'm going back home to my family and stuff. And, like, after my big adventures. And it just, I don't know, it just felt like coming off a high. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like coming down and, like, okay, like, I'm not doing as much. But it's actually been one of the biggest, like, growth periods and extra different periods of my life that were honestly really needed. So I think it overall was a very positive thing.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. I've had that before where you think some things like, oh, I have to do this, and then I do it because I need to, and then you realize like, actually I didn't do this.
You create like this narrative as if that thing is like the reason why you have value, and it's like, oh, it's like, dude, that's not
right. And it's not the reason why you have value at all. It's just something that just changes and you go through it.
Ends up being honestly a better play. I mean, honestly, no matter what you do, it's like you can just make it positive if you really want it to.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching my YouTube video. You can find Max Nebula's book linked below. You can also find his Wappad account online linked below of his stories for The Raging Storm and Forget Me Now. You can go out to Amazon
and Barnes & Noble.
Amazon and Barnes & Noble to find Tom's Adventures, his first children's book that's published. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you another time. Peace.
Peace.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Just in case we didn't do that for the camera. How'd you feel about those rapid questions?
I think those were good. The cat and dog one fucked me up.
The cat and dog.
I would have said dog for most of my life, but recently I'm like, I kind of fuck with cats though.